we explore English the way it is truly used in real life: calm, natural, and meaningful. If you're listening today, it means you're ready for something deeper than textbooks or short lessons. You want to hear how English flows in everyday thoughts, quiet moments, and real conversations. This episode is designed to help you relax, listen carefully, and absorb the rhythm of advanced English in a natural way. Today, I want to share a series of real-life moments. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed, just ordinary days, small choices, and simple experiences that many people recognize. These are the moments where English becomes real, familiar, and easy to understand. A few mornings ago, I woke up earlier than usual. The room was still dim, and the city outside felt quiet and slow. I stayed in bed for a few seconds, listening to the distant sound of traffic and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Normally, I wake up around 7, but that day my eyes opened closer to 6. Instead of checking my phone, I took a deep breath and enjoyed the calm. I got out of bed, made my way to the kitchen, and put the kettle on, while waiting for the water to boil. I stood by the window and watched the sky slowly change color. Early mornings have a different feeling. They feel honest and unhurried. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the small table near the window, letting my thoughts wander. As I sipped my tea, I thought about how mornings often shape the rest of the day. When I rush, everything feels heavy. When I slow down, even simple tasks feel manageable. This is something many people experience, even if they don't talk about it often. After finishing my tea, I got dressed and stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh. The streets weren't busy yet. A few people walked past me, each focused on their own routines. Some carried coffee cups, others wore headphones. Everyone seemed to be moving quietly toward their day. I walked to the bus stop and checked the schedule. The bus arrived a few minutes earlier than expected, and I found a seat by the window. I like sitting there because it gives me time to observe without feeling involved. As the bus moved forward, I watched shops opening, lights turning on, and people unlocking doors. It's interesting how much life happens quietly, without anyone paying much attention. Across from me, a man was reading something on his phone with deep concentration. A woman nearby stared out the window, lost in thought. No one spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Moments like this are perfect for listening, not just to English, but to life itself. During the ride, I thought about how travel time can be useful in small ways. Some people scroll through social media, others listen to music or podcasts. Sometimes, simply observing is enough. Watching faces, noticing body language, and listening to surrounding sounds can be grounding. After about half an hour, I reached my stop and walked the rest of the way through a quiet neighborhood. Trees lined the street, and the morning light filtered through their leaves. I passed a small bakery that had just opened. The smell of fresh bread drifted into the air, warm and inviting. I made a mental note to stop there later. When I arrived at my parents' place, they greeted me with familiar smiles. There's something comforting about seeing people who know you well. We didn't rush into conversation. We simply sat together for a moment, enjoying the calm. Later, we went for a walk in a nearby park. The path was clean and shaded, and the sound of footsteps mixed with birdsong. As we walked, my father talked about a small project he had started recently. Nothing big, just something he enjoyed working on each day. He explained it carefully, paying attention to details, and I could hear the pride in his voice. Listening to him made me think about patience, about how doing something regularly, without pressure, often brings the best results. This idea applies to many things, including learning English. Progress doesn't always come quickly, but it comes steadily when you stay consistent. After the walk, we had breakfast together, simple food, familiar flavors. While eating, we talked about work, plans, and small challenges. My mother listened more than she spoke, then offered gentle advice. She reminded me not to carry everything at once and to leave space for rest. Her words stayed with me. Later that day, I stopped by a small bookstore. It's one of those quiet places where time feels slower. I walked between the shelves, running my fingers along the spines of books, until one caught my attention. I sat down and read a few pages. The atmosphere made it easy to focus. While reading, I exchanged a few words with someone nearby about a book we both liked. It was a short conversation, but it felt natural. These brief interactions often leave a stronger impression than long conversations. They remind us how easily connection can happen. As I left the bookstore, I realized how meaningful small moments can be. Choosing a book, sharing a thought, walking without a destination. These moments often pass unnoticed, yet they shape our days quietly. On the way home, I thought about how language fits into all of this. English isn't only something we study, it's something we live. When we describe what we see, think about what we feel, and reflect on our experiences, English becomes part of our inner world. That evening, I cooked dinner with my husband. We kept it simple, fresh ingredients, familiar steps. While cooking, we talked about our day and our plans. Cooking together always feels grounding. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. After dinner, we took a short walk around the neighborhood. The sky was darker now, and the air felt cooler. Lights glowed softly from windows. People passed by, some talking quietly, others walking alone. Life continued, steady and calm. Before going to bed, I spent a few minutes writing, just a short reflection on the day. Writing helps organize thoughts and brings clarity. It's also a gentle way to practice English, without pressure. As I closed my notebook, I thought about how learning happens, not in big leaps, but in small moments repeated over time, listening, observing, reflecting. That's how English becomes natural. And as you continue listening, I invite you to slow down. Let the words settle. Notice how English sounds when it's calm, real, and familiar. I woke up the next morning to soft light moving across the wall. The room felt quiet, calm, and unhurried. For a moment, I stayed still and listened. No alarms, no notifications, just the low sounds of a waking city somewhere in the distance. I took a slow breath and reminded myself that there was no need to rush. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple breakfast. Nothing special. Toast, fruit, and a cup of coffee while the coffee brewed. I looked out the window again. A few people were already walking down the street. Some carried bags. Others walked dogs or pushed strollers. These small scenes are easy to overlook, but they say a lot about daily life. While eating, I decided to play an English podcast quietly in the background. I didn't try to understand every word. I simply listened to the rhythm and tone. This kind of listening feels natural. It doesn't feel like studying. It feels like being present. After breakfast, I got ready to leave the house. I had a few errands to run, nothing urgent. I chose to walk instead of driving. Walking gives me time to think, to observe, and to notice details that usually pass unnoticed. As I walked, I paid attention to the sounds around me, footsteps on pavement, a door closing, someone laughing nearby. These sounds create a rhythm that feels comforting. I found myself describing what I saw in my head, quietly, in English. This habit helps English feel like part of my natural thinking, not something separate. I stopped at a small market to buy fresh vegetables. The vendor greeted me with a warm smile. We exchanged a few simple words. He asked how my day was going. I answered honestly, without thinking too much about grammar or vocabulary. The conversation felt easy. While selecting vegetables, I noticed the colors and textures: smooth tomatoes, crisp greens, bright peppers. Describing these things in English helps build vocabulary naturally because the words are connected to real experiences. After leaving the market, I walked toward a nearby park. The path was lined with trees, and the air smelled fresh. A few people were sitting on benches, reading or watching the world go by. Others walked slowly, enjoying the quiet. I sat down for a moment and watched a group of children playing. Their laughter was loud and carefree. Watching them reminded me how important it is to stay curious and present. Language learning works the same way. When we stay curious, learning feels lighter. While sitting there, I thought about how many opportunities we have each day to practice English. Not in formal lessons, but in small moments, reading signs, listening to conversations, describing what we see. After some time, I stood up and continued walking. On my way home, I passed a small cafe. I decided to go inside and order a drink. The cafe was quiet, with soft music playing in the background. I chose a seat by the window. While waiting, I noticed a couple nearby having a calm conversation. They spoke softly, clearly, and naturally. I listened without trying to understand every word. Instead, I focused on how they expressed themselves, their pauses, their tone, their rhythm. When my drink arrived, I took my time. I didn't check my phone. I simply sat there, enjoying the moment. This kind of stillness helps the mind relax. And when the mind relaxes, listening becomes easier. Later, I returned home and spent some time organizing my space. I cleaned my desk, arranged papers, and put books back on the shelf. While doing this, I described my actions quietly in English. Simple words, simple sentences. This practice makes vocabulary stick. In the afternoon, I had some work to do. I needed to prepare a short presentation for an upcoming meeting. Before starting, I took a moment to plan my thoughts. I focused on being clear and direct. Clear English is often more effective than complex English. While working, I noticed how often we think faster than we speak. Slowing down helps ideas come out more naturally. This is especially true in English. When we slow down, our sentences become clearer. After finishing my work, I felt satisfied, not because everything was perfect, but because I stayed focused and calm. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with a book. Reading in English has become part of my daily routine. I choose books that feel comfortable, not too difficult, not too easy. As I read, I paused occasionally to think about certain phrases, how they were structured, why they felt natural. This kind of reading helps internalize patterns without effort. In the early evening, my husband returned home. We talked about our day while preparing dinner together. Cooking gives us a reason to talk without pressure. We talk about simple things, plans, thoughts, small observations. After dinner, we washed the dishes and tidied the kitchen. Then we went outside for a short walk. The sky was turning darker, and the streetlights were beginning to glow. The neighborhood felt peaceful. As we walked, we talked about nothing important. and that was enough. Sometimes conversation doesn't need a purpose, it only needs presence. Before going to sleep, I wrote a few sentences in my notebook. I wrote about the market, the park, the cafe, and the walk. Writing like this helps connect listening, speaking, and thinking. As I closed my notebook, I reminded myself that English grows through everyday life, slowly, naturally, and with patience. I turned off the light and let the day settle quietly. The next day began without any clear plan. I woke up feeling rested, with no urgency pushing me out of bed. I stayed still for a moment, noticing how the morning felt different when there was nothing I had to rush toward. This sense of ease made it easier to breathe, think, and move calmly. After getting up, I opened the window to let fresh air into the room. The sounds outside were soft and familiar. Someone sweeping the sidewalk, a car starting in the distance, a bird calling from a nearby tree. These small sounds created a quiet background to the morning. I prepared a light breakfast and ate slowly. While eating, I thought about how often we rush through meals without noticing taste or texture. That morning, I paid attention, the warmth of the food, the simple flavors, the feeling of being present. Once finished, I decided to step outside for a short walk. I didn't bring headphones. I wanted to hear the world as it was. As I walked, I noticed small details: a cracked sidewalk, a plant growing through it, a shop owner opening the door and arranging items outside. I found myself describing these scenes silently in English. This habit has become natural over time. It helps connect language with real experience. I wasn't translating, I was simply thinking. I walked toward a quieter street I don't often take. The houses there looked older, with small gardens in front. Some gardens were carefully maintained. Others were wild and overgrown. Both felt beautiful in their own way. An older man was watering his plants. We exchanged greetings and spoke briefly. He talked about how much attention plants need, especially during warmer days. His words were simple, but full of care. Listening to him reminded me that clarity often comes from simplicity. After continuing my walk, I stopped at a bench and sat down. I watched people pass by. Some walked quickly, others moved slowly, as if they had nowhere else to be. Everyone carried their own story. While sitting there, I reflected on how English fits into moments like this. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be quiet. It can exist in thoughts, observations, and simple exchanges. Later that morning, I returned home and spent time reading. I chose a book that felt comforting, not challenging. I read slowly, letting the sentences settle. When a phrase stood out, I paused and repeated it softly. This helps internalize natural rhythm and structure. In the afternoon, I went out again to run a few errands at a small shop. I asked for help finding something. The conversation was brief and polite. These short interactions are excellent practice because they are real and familiar. While walking back, I noticed the weather changing. The sky became slightly overcast, and the air felt heavier. I adjusted my pace and paid attention to how the environment affected my mood. At home, I decided to do some light cleaning. I put things back in their place and opened the windows again. While cleaning, I described my actions in English. This helps vocabulary connect with movement and routine. Later, I prepared something warm to drink and sat down near the window. I watched as light rain began to fall. Raindrops on glass have a calming effect. The steady sound made it easier to slow down. As evening approached, My husband and I prepared dinner together. We talked about simple topics, things we noticed during the day, thoughts that came and went, nothing urgent, just shared time. After dinner, we stayed in and listened to music quietly. Sometimes, quiet moments are more valuable than busy ones. They allow space for reflection. Before bed, I wrote a few lines in my notebook. I wrote about the walk, the conversation with the gardener, the rain, and the quiet evening. Writing helps make sense of small experiences. As I finished writing, I thought about how learning English follows the same rhythm. It works best when it becomes part of everyday life, calm, repeated, connected to real moments. I turned off the light, letting the rain continue outside, steady and gentle. The following morning felt lighter. The rain had passed during the night, leaving the air cool and clean. When I opened the window, I could smell damp earth and fresh leaves. There's something grounding about mornings like this. They feel new, but familiar at the same time. I started the day with a simple routine. I stretched slowly, paying attention to how my body felt. While moving, I described each action quietly in English. Stretch the arms, roll the shoulders, take a deep breath. This habit helps connect language to physical experience, making words feel natural instead of abstract. After stretching, I prepared breakfast, oatmeal with fruit. I watched the steam rise as I stirred the pot. Small moments like this can be calming if we allow them to be. I ate slowly and thought about the day ahead, without over-planning. Later in the morning, I decided to visit a nearby library. It's a place I return to often because it encourages focus and quiet thought. The walk there was peaceful, the streets were calm, and the light reflected softly off windows and parked cars. Inside the library, the atmosphere was familiar and comforting. Rows of books, soft footsteps, low voices. I found a seat near a window and chose a book that caught my interest. Reading in English has become less about learning and more about enjoying ideas. As I read, I noticed how the author described emotions and everyday scenes. Simple words, used carefully, can create strong images. I paused from time to time to reflect on certain sentences and why they worked so well. After spending some time there, I returned the book and stepped outside. The world felt a bit louder after the quiet of the library, but not overwhelming. I walked slowly, letting my thoughts settle. On the way home, I stopped at a small cafe. I ordered a drink and waited patiently. The barista moved confidently, repeating familiar steps. Watching people work can be surprisingly calming. There's comfort in routine. I took my drink to a table near the window and sat quietly. A few people came and went. Some talked softly, others worked on laptops. I listened to the natural rhythm of conversation around me, not focusing on details, just the flow. Later that afternoon, I returned home and spent time organizing some old notes. As I sorted through them, I noticed how much progress had been made over time. Improvement often happens quietly, without us noticing day to day. In the evening, my husband and I decided to take a longer walk than usual. The sky was clear, and the air felt cool. We talked about ideas, memories, and small hopes for the future. The conversation moved naturally, without effort. When we returned home, we prepared a simple dinner and ate together. Afterward, we sat in the living room, lights low, enjoying the calm. Before bed, I wrote again. Just a few sentences. Writing helps close the day gently. It gives shape to experiences that might otherwise fade. As I lay down, I thought about how English fits into all of this. It isn't something separate from life, it's woven into it, in thoughts, conversations, routines, and quiet moments. And with that thought, I let the day come to a close. The next morning arrived quietly. No alarm, no sudden noise, just a soft awareness that the day had begun. I stayed in bed a little longer than usual, listening to the gentle sounds outside, a door opening somewhere nearby, footsteps passing on the street, life moving forward at its own pace. When I finally got up, I made my way to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood there for a moment, letting the light fill the room. Mornings like this remind me how important it is to ease into the day instead of rushing into it. I prepared a light breakfast and sat at the table, looking out the window. A neighbor was walking their dog. Another person was unlocking their car. These scenes repeat themselves daily, yet they never feel exactly the same. There's comfort in that familiarity. After breakfast, I decided to spend some time writing, not for work, just for myself. I opened my notebook and wrote freely about whatever came to mind. Writing without pressure allows thoughts to flow naturally. It also helps English feel more personal and expressive. Later in the morning, I stepped outside to run a few errands. The sky was bright, and the air felt crisp. As I walked, I noticed how the light changed the color of buildings and trees. I found myself describing these details silently in English, without effort. At the grocery store, I exchanged a few words with the cashier, a simple greeting, a brief comment about the weather. These short interactions may seem small, but they build confidence over time. They remind us that English doesn't have to be perfect to be effective. On my way home, I passed a small flower shop. The door was open, and colorful arrangements filled the space. I stopped to look for a moment. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with the cool air. I thought about how sensory details like this can enrich language. Words feel stronger when they connect to sight, smell, and touch. Back at home, I spent the early afternoon reading. I chose a book that felt familiar, something I could enjoy without effort. Reading like this helps reinforce natural patterns without making learning feel heavy. As the afternoon passed, I did some light household tasks, folding laundry, tidying shelves. While doing these things, I spoke quietly to myself in English, simple sentences, clear actions. This habit makes everyday vocabulary easy to recall. In the early evening, my husband returned home. We talked briefly about our day before deciding to cook together. The kitchen filled with warm smells and familiar sounds. Cooking together creates space for easy conversation. No pressure, no expectations. After dinner, we sat outside for a while. The air had cooled, and the street was calmer now. A few neighbors passed by, offering friendly nods or quiet greetings. These small moments of connection feel grounding. As night approached, I took time to reflect. I wrote a few lines about the day, focusing on how it felt rather than what I did. Writing about feelings helps expand expressive language and deepen understanding. Before going to sleep, I thought about how learning English mirrors life itself. It doesn't move in straight lines. It grows through repetition, patience, and attention to detail. I turned off the light and let the quiet of the night settle around me, ready to begin again the next day. The morning that followed felt calm and unremarkable in the best possible way. I woke up without a clear sense of urgency, and that alone made the day feel lighter. I opened the curtains and let the natural light fill the room. The sky was pale and clear, and the street below was already slowly coming to life. I made my way to the kitchen and prepared breakfast. This time, I chose something simple and familiar while eating. I stood by the counter and watched people passing by outside. Some walked quickly, others moved slowly, as if they were in no hurry at all. These small differences in pace say a lot about how people experience their day. After breakfast, I spent a few minutes reviewing notes I had written the night before. Reading my own words in English helps me notice how my thinking has become more natural over time. The sentences feel less forced. The expressions feel more like something I would actually say. Later in the morning, I decided to go out for a longer walk. I chose a route I don't usually take, just to see something different. As I walked, I noticed small changes in the neighborhood. A new shop sign, fresh paint on a building, a bench that had been moved closer to the path. I paused near a small park and sat down for a while. The park was quiet. A few people sat alone, reading or resting. Others walked slowly along the path. I listened to the sounds around me, leaves moving in the breeze, footsteps on gravel, distant voices blending together. While sitting there, I reflected on how much listening matters when learning English. Not just listening to lessons, but listening to real life, the way people pause, change tone, or choose simple words to express something meaningful. After some time, I continued my walk and stopped at a local cafe. I ordered a drink and waited quietly. The staff moved efficiently, repeating familiar actions. Watching routines like this reminds me how repetition builds confidence, both in work and in language. I took my drink outside and sat at a small table. I didn't rush. I let the moment unfold naturally. Sometimes, slowing down makes everything clearer, including language. In the afternoon, I returned home and spent time organizing a few personal things. Old notebooks, photos, small items with memories attached to them. While sorting through them, I found myself recalling moments from the past and describing them silently in English. This kind of reflection helps deepen vocabulary because emotions give words meaning. English becomes more than a tool. It becomes a way to understand experiences. As evening approached, I prepared dinner on my own. The kitchen was quiet, and I enjoyed the calm. I focused on each step, describing actions in simple, clear sentences. Cooking like this feels meditative. After eating, I went outside for a short walk. The sky was darker now, and the air felt cooler. Streetlights cast soft shadows on the ground. A few people passed by, wrapped in jackets, heading home. Before going to bed, I wrote again. Just a few sentences about the walk, the park, and the quiet moments in between. Writing at the end of the day helps bring everything together. As I closed my notebook, I felt grateful for the simplicity of the day. Nothing special had happened, yet it felt complete. Learning English, like living well, often happens in moments like these. Quiet, steady, and real. I turned off the light and let the night settle, knowing another day would come with its own small experiences. The next morning began with a sense of balance, not excitement, not heaviness, just a quiet feeling of readiness. I opened my eyes and noticed how still the room felt. The light was soft, filtered through the curtains, and the air felt cool against my skin. I started the day by making the bed. It's a small habit, but it helps create a sense of order. While smoothing the sheets, I thought about how small routines often set the tone for everything that follows. When something begins calmly, the rest of the day usually follows. In the kitchen, I prepared a simple breakfast and stood by the window while eating. I noticed how the street looked different at this hour. More movement now, more voices, a bus passing by, someone talking on the phone. Life felt awake, but not rushed. After breakfast, I sat down with a cup of coffee and opened a book. I didn't plan to read for long, just a few pages. Reading in the morning helps my mind focus. The language feels fresh, and the words come more easily. I paused often, not because the text was difficult, but because certain sentences felt thoughtful. I reflected on how the author chose simple expressions to describe complex ideas. This is something I admire in advanced English. Clarity always feels more powerful than complexity. Later in the morning, I went out to take care of a few tasks. I walked instead of driving, enjoying the movement and the fresh air. As I walked, I noticed small details, reflections in shop windows, the sound of footsteps behind me, the smell of coffee drifting from a nearby cafe. I stopped briefly at a corner shop. The interaction was quick and polite. These everyday exchanges may feel unimportant, but they build confidence. They remind us that English works best when it's practical and natural. On my way home, I took a different route and found myself in a quieter area. Fewer people, more space. I slowed my pace and let my thoughts wander. Thinking in English has become something I do without effort now. It feels natural, like an internal conversation. When I got home, I spent some time doing light chores, washing dishes, wiping surfaces, organizing a shelf. While working, I described each action aloud, quietly. These simple sentences reinforce everyday vocabulary and make speaking feel automatic. In the afternoon, I took a short break and sat near the window. I watched clouds move slowly across the sky. Sometimes doing nothing is exactly what the mind needs. In these moments, language settles in gently. Later, I checked a few messages and replied carefully. Writing short, clear responses helps keep communication natural. I've learned that it's better to say something simply and honestly than to search for perfect words. As the day moved toward evening, my husband came home. We talked about our day while preparing dinner together. We didn't rush. Cooking felt relaxed, familiar. Conversation flowed easily. After dinner, we went for a short walk. The air was cooler now, and the streets were quieter. A few lights glowed in windows. People passed by with calm expressions, ready to end their day. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote a short reflection. Not a summary, just a few thoughts. Writing helps close the day and make space for rest. As I lay down, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. Nothing extraordinary had happened, but the day felt complete. English, once again, had been part of life, not something separate from it. I closed my eyes, letting the calm carry into the night. The morning arrived gently, without any sharp edges. I woke up feeling clear, as if my thoughts had rested along with my body. I stayed still for a moment, noticing the quiet, and let myself ease into awareness rather than forcing the day to begin. After getting up, I opened the window and let fresh air flow in. The sky was light and open, and the street below moved at a steady pace. I could hear distant conversations, footsteps, and the soft sound of traffic. These sounds blended together in a familiar way, creating a calm background. I prepared breakfast slowly, paying attention to each small action. Pouring water, cutting fruit, setting the table. While doing this, I thought about how routines like these create a sense of stability. They don't demand much, yet they support the entire day. While eating, I listened to an English audio story. I didn't try to analyze it. I simply let the voice guide my attention. The speaker's tone was relaxed, the pacing natural. This kind of listening helps English feel intuitive rather than technical. Later in the morning, I decided to spend some time outside. I put on comfortable shoes and went for a walk. The weather was mild, and the air felt easy to breathe. As I walked, I noticed the rhythm of my steps and how my thoughts followed that rhythm. I passed by familiar places and a few new ones. A small shop I hadn't noticed before, a bench placed under a tree. These small discoveries added a sense of quiet interest to the walk. At one point, I stopped to watch someone repairing a bicycle. He worked carefully, focusing on each detail. I stood there for a moment, observing his movements. Watching someone fully engaged in a task can be strangely calming. It reminds me how attention brings clarity. As I continued walking, I found myself describing what I saw in English. Not deliberately, it simply happened. This is one of the signs that English has become part of daily thinking. Around midday, I returned home and prepared a light lunch. I ate slowly and took a short break afterward. Rest doesn't always mean sleeping. Sometimes it simply means pausing. In the afternoon, I sat down to read. I chose something thoughtful but not heavy. Reading in English during quiet hours helps deepen understanding because the mind is less distracted. Later, I did a few household tasks. Nothing urgent, just small things that needed attention. As I worked, I spoke quietly to myself in English. Simple phrases, clear actions. This kind of practice feels effortless because it fits naturally into routine. As evening approached, the light in the room began to change. Shadows grew longer, and the air cooled slightly. I made myself a warm drink and sat near the window, watching the sky shift into softer colors. When my husband came home, we talked briefly before preparing dinner. We shared simple stories from our day. These conversations don't need structure. They unfold naturally. After dinner, we stayed in and relaxed. The day had been full in a quiet way. Not busy, but complete. Before going to bed, I reflected once more. I thought about how English has slowly become something I live with, not something I struggle with. Through listening, observing, and reflecting, it has found its place in everyday life. I turned off the light, letting the calm of the day settle, ready to begin again tomorrow. The next day began with a quiet sense of curiosity. I didn't have any specific plans, but I felt open to whatever the day might bring. When I woke up, the light in the room was gentle, and the air felt cool and fresh. I took a moment to stretch, noticing how my body felt after a full night of rest. I went to the kitchen and prepared breakfast. This time, I made something slightly different, just to change the routine a little. While eating, I stood near the window and watched people moving through the street. Some walked quickly, clearly focused on their destination. Others slowed down, stopping to look around or greet someone they knew. After breakfast, I decided to start the day with writing. I opened my notebook and wrote freely for a few minutes. I didn't worry about structure or grammar. I simply wrote whatever came to mind. This habit helps thoughts flow naturally in English and makes expression feel more personal. Later in the morning, I stepped outside for a walk. The weather was pleasant, and the sky was clear. As I walked, I noticed how the neighborhood felt more active than earlier in the week. Shops were open, people were talking. Life felt awake. I passed a small street market where vendors were arranging their goods. I stopped to look around and exchanged a few words with one of them. The conversation was brief and friendly. Moments like these remind me that English doesn't need to be perfect to be effective. It only needs to be clear and sincere. Continuing my walk, I found a quiet path lined with trees. I slowed my pace and listened to the sound of leaves moving in the breeze. I described the scene silently in English, focusing on simple words that felt accurate and natural. Around midday, I returned home and prepared lunch. While cooking, I explained each step out loud, just as I often do. This habit keeps vocabulary active and makes speaking feel automatic. After lunch, I took some time to rest. I sat down with a book and read for a while, letting the words settle without pressure. Reading during the day feels different from reading at night. The mind feels lighter, more open. In the afternoon, I organized a few personal items, old papers, notebooks, and small objects that had collected over time. As I sorted through them, memories surfaced. I found myself describing those memories in English, connecting language with emotion. As the day moved toward evening, I stepped outside again. The air had cooled, and the light softened. I walked slowly, enjoying the quiet rhythm of the neighborhood. A few people passed by, exchanging polite greetings. When I returned home, I prepared dinner. The process felt familiar and calming. Cooking gives the hands something to do while the mind relaxes. After eating, I sat quietly for a while. No music, no screens, just stillness. These moments of silence are valuable. They allow thoughts to settle and make space for reflection. Before going to bed, I wrote a few sentences in my notebook. I didn't aim for anything special, just honesty. Writing like this helps close the day gently. As I lay down, I reflected on how learning English mirrors this process. It grows through everyday moments, small habits, and steady attention. There's no rush, only consistency. I closed my eyes, letting the calm carry me into rest. The morning that followed felt steady and familiar. I woke up with a clear mind and no strong emotions pulling me in any direction. The room was quiet, and the light outside suggested an ordinary day ahead. Sometimes, those are the best days. I got out of bed and went straight to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and stood there for a moment, letting myself fully wake up. Simple habits like this help me feel grounded before the day begins. I prepared breakfast and sat down at the table. While eating, I thought about how often we treat routine as something boring, when in reality it gives structure and comfort. Knowing what comes next can be reassuring. After breakfast, I spent some time reviewing messages and emails. I replied slowly and carefully, choosing clear and natural words. Writing in English has become easier over time, especially when I focus on clarity instead of complexity. Later in the morning, I decided to visit a nearby park. The walk there was calm, the streets weren't crowded, and the air felt clean. As I walked, I noticed small details: a bird resting on a fence, a leaf moving across the sidewalk. These quiet moments often pass unnoticed, yet they add depth to the day. At the park, I found a bench and sat down. I watched people come and go. Some were walking dogs, others sat alone, lost in thought. Observing people without judging or interrupting helps develop patience and awareness. While sitting there, I reflected on how listening works at an advanced level. It's not about understanding every word. It's about catching meaning, tone, and intention. The same is true in everyday conversations. After some time, I stood up and continued walking. On my way home, I stopped at a small shop to buy something I needed. The interaction was brief, polite, and easy. These everyday conversations reinforce confidence in a natural way. Back at home, I spent the afternoon working quietly. I focused on one task at a time, avoiding unnecessary distractions. Clear thinking leads to clear expression, especially in another language. In the late afternoon, I took a short break and made myself a warm drink. I stood by the window and watched the light change. Clouds moved slowly, and shadows shifted across buildings. The world felt calm and predictable. As evening approached, my husband came home. We talked about the day and shared small observations. Nothing dramatic, just simple conversation. This kind of exchange helps language feel real and connected to life. We prepared dinner together, moving comfortably around the kitchen. Cooking side by side creates space for relaxed conversation. There's no pressure to say anything impressive. After dinner, we went for a gentle walk. The air was cooler now, and the streets were quieter. A few people passed by, ending their day just as we were. Before going to bed, I wrote again, just a short reflection on the park, the quiet work, and the evening walk. Writing helps turn experiences into language and keeps English active. As I lay down, I felt a sense of balance. The day hadn't been exciting, but it had been full in its own way. Learning English feels similar. It doesn't always feel dramatic, but progress is happening quietly. I closed my eyes, letting the day settle, ready for whatever comes next. The following morning began with a soft sense of intention, not a strict plan, but a quiet awareness that I wanted the day to move gently. I opened my eyes and noticed how rested my body felt. The room was still, and the air felt cool and calm. I got up and made my way to the kitchen. I prepared breakfast slowly. Without multitasking, I sliced fruit, poured water, and stood by the counter while eating. Outside, the street was already active, but not noisy. People moved with purpose, starting their routines. While eating, I thought about how often we rush through mornings without noticing them. Slowing down allows thoughts to settle and creates space for clarity. This habit has helped me feel more present, not only in life, but also in language. After breakfast, I sat down with my notebook and wrote a short reflection. I wrote about how the morning felt and what I wanted to focus on that day. Writing first thing in the morning helps organize thoughts and makes English feel like a natural extension of thinking. Later, I went out for a walk. I chose a familiar route, one I've walked many times before. Even familiar paths change slightly each day. The light is different, the air feels different. People appear and disappear. I noticed these details and described them silently in English. I passed a small bakery and stopped for a moment to watch the baker arranging bread in the window. The movements were careful and repetitive. Watching someone work with focus can be calming. It reminds me that attention improves everything we do, including communication. Continuing my walk, I entered a quieter street lined with trees. Leaves moved gently in the breeze, and the sound of traffic faded. I slowed my pace and let my thoughts flow naturally. Thinking in English felt effortless in that moment. Around midday, I returned home and prepared lunch. While cooking, I described each step out loud. Simple verbs, clear actions. This habit keeps vocabulary active and connected to real movement. After lunch, I rested for a while. I sat near the window and did nothing. No reading, no listening, just quiet. Moments like this allow the mind to reset. In the afternoon, I spent some time reading. I chose a book that explored everyday experiences and reflections. The language was simple but thoughtful. I paused occasionally to notice how ideas were expressed clearly without complicated structures. Later, I organized a few things around the house, old notes, books, small objects. While sorting, memories surfaced. I described them silently in English, noticing how emotion adds depth to language. As evening approached, I stepped outside again. The air was cooler, and the light softened. I walked slowly, noticing how the neighborhood changed as people returned home. Doors opened, lights turned on. Conversations drifted through open windows. When I returned home, I prepared dinner. Cooking alone can be just as calming as cooking together. I focused on the process and let the day settle. After eating, I wrote a few sentences about the day, not a summary, just small observations. Writing helps close the day gently. As I got ready for bed, I reflected on how English has become part of my everyday rhythm. Through listening, observing, speaking, and writing, it has found its place naturally. I turned off the light, letting the quiet of the night take over, ready to continue tomorrow. The next day unfolded slowly, without anything demanding immediate attention. I woke up feeling rested and calm, with a sense that there was enough time for everything. I stayed in bed for a short while, listening to the quiet sounds outside, a distant car passing, someone opening a window. The world was awake, but not rushing. When I got up, I went straight to the kitchen and made myself a warm drink. I stood near the window while sipping it, watching the street below. People moved in familiar patterns. Some walked quickly, others took their time. These everyday scenes always remind me how different each person's rhythm can be. I decided to start the morning with gentle movement. I stretched, moved my shoulders, and took a few deep breaths. While doing this, I described the movements quietly in English. This habit keeps language connected to the body and makes vocabulary feel natural and practical. After stretching, I prepared breakfast and ate slowly. I noticed how much better food tastes when you're not distracted. Paying attention to simple things helps the mind stay focused, which is important for listening and speaking clearly. Later in the morning, I stepped outside for a walk. The air felt fresh, and the light was soft. As I walked, I noticed small changes in the neighborhood. A new sign on a shop. Fresh flowers placed outside a doorway. These details often go unnoticed, but they add character to daily life. I passed by a small workshop where someone was fixing furniture. The sound of tools echoed softly. I stopped for a moment to watch. The person worked carefully, taking time with each step. Watching focused work reminds me that patience improves results, whether in craft or communication. Continuing my walk, I found a quiet spot and sat down. I observed people passing by, listening to fragments of conversation. I didn't try to follow every word. I focused on tone, pace, and emotion. Advanced listening often works best this way. Around midday, I returned home and prepared a simple lunch. While cooking, I explained the steps aloud in English: chop, stir, taste. This practice keeps everyday language active without effort. After eating, I rested for a while. I sat near the window and watched clouds move across the sky. Doing nothing for a short time helps reset the mind and makes learning feel lighter. In the afternoon, I spent time reading. I chose a book that felt thoughtful but easy to follow. I paid attention to how ideas flowed naturally from one sentence to the next. Clear structure makes understanding easier. Later, I did some light organizing around the house. I sorted papers and put things back in their place. While working, I described what I was doing quietly. This habit reinforces practical vocabulary and builds fluency over time. As evening arrived, the light in the room changed. Shadows grew longer, and the air cooled. I made myself a warm drink and sat quietly, reflecting on the day. Nothing special had happened, yet the day felt full. When my husband came home, we talked about our day while preparing dinner. The conversation was relaxed and unplanned. Sharing small details helps language feel personal and real. After dinner, we went for a short walk. The neighborhood was calm, and the streets were quieter now. A few people passed by, ending their day. Before going to bed, I wrote a short reflection. Writing helps connect experience with language and brings clarity to thoughts. As I lay down, I felt thankful for the simplicity of the day. Learning English, like living well, grows through moments like these, quiet, steady, and honest. I closed my eyes, letting the calm carry into the night. The morning came with a quiet sense of continuity. It felt familiar, as if the rhythm of the days had settled into something steady and comfortable. I woke up naturally, without any rush, and stayed still for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood starting another day. I got out of bed and opened the curtains. The sky was light, and the air looked clear. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple breakfast. While waiting for the kettle to boil, I leaned against the counter and let my thoughts wander. I wasn't planning the day in detail. I simply allowed ideas to come and go. While eating, I listened to the sounds outside, someone talking on the phone, a car door closing, footsteps passing by. These everyday sounds form a kind of background music to life. I noticed how easily my mind understood English phrases that drifted through my thoughts. There was no effort involved. It felt natural. After breakfast, I decided to spend some time jungling my thoughts. I sat down with my notebook and wrote freely. I wrote about how the week had been going, about small observations, and about how certain routines had started to feel comforting rather than repetitive. Writing like this helps language become personal. Later in the morning, I stepped outside to run a few errands. The walk was pleasant, and the weather felt balanced. Not too warm, not too cool. As I walked, I paid attention to how people interacted with each other. Short greetings, polite smiles, small exchanges that don't take much time but add warmth to the day. I stopped at a local shop and asked a simple question. The answer was clear and friendly. Conversations like this remind me that real English is often simple and direct. There's no need to impress. The goal is understanding. On the way home, I took a slightly longer route and passed through a residential area. Houses stood quietly, some with curtains open, others closed. I imagined the lives unfolding inside. Thinking this way helps build descriptive language and narrative skills naturally. When I returned home, I prepared lunch and ate quietly. I didn't multitask. I focused on the food, the taste, and the feeling of being present. Moments of focus like this improve listening and comprehension because the mind learns to stay with one thing. In the afternoon, I spent time reviewing something I had read earlier in the week. I noticed how much easier it was to understand now. Repetition doesn't always feel productive in the moment, but it deepens understanding over time. Later, I did some light cleaning. I opened windows, let fresh air in, and moved slowly while cleaning. I described my actions in English, using simple verbs and clear sentences. This kind of practice keeps vocabulary active without effort. As the day moved toward evening, the light shifted again. I made myself a warm drink and sat near the window. I watched people returning home, some alone, some together. The pace of the street slowed. When my husband came home, we talked briefly before starting dinner. We didn't plan the conversation, it unfolded naturally. These relaxed moments are where language feels most real. After dinner, we stayed in and enjoyed the quiet. No need to fill the space with noise. Silence can be comfortable when shared. Before going to bed, I wrote a few lines about the day. Writing helps capture moments that might otherwise fade. It also reinforces the connection between experience and language. As I turned off the light, I felt a quiet appreciation for the rhythm of everyday life. Learning English has followed this same rhythm, slow, steady, and grounded in real moments. I closed my eyes, ready to continue the journey the next day. The next morning arrived with a gentle clarity. I woke up feeling centered, as if the rhythm of recent days had created a steady foundation. There was no urgency, no pressure to move quickly. I stayed in bed for a short moment, breathing slowly and letting the day come to me. When I got up, I opened the window wide. Cool air filled the room, carrying quiet sounds from outside. Somewhere nearby, a bicycle passed, a bird landed briefly on the railing. These small details grounded me before the day even began. I prepared breakfast and ate at the table instead of standing. This small choice made a difference. Sitting down gave the morning a sense of intention. While eating, I reflected on how habits shape our mindset. When we choose calm actions, our thoughts tend to follow. After breakfast, I decided to spend some time reading. I picked up a book I had already started and read a few pages slowly. I didn't rush through the text. I paid attention to how sentences flowed and how ideas connected. Advanced English often feels simple because it focuses on clarity rather than decoration. Later in the morning, I went outside for a walk. The weather was pleasant, and the streets felt open. As I walked, I noticed how familiar places looked slightly different each day. Light, movement, and mood change the way we see things. I passed a small cafe and stopped briefly to look inside. People sat quietly, some working, some talking softly. I ordered a drink and took it to a table near the window. While waiting, I listened to the natural conversations around me, not trying to understand everything, just absorbing the sound of English as it is truly spoken. After finishing my drink, I walked home at an easy pace. I didn't feel the need to hurry. Slowing down allows thoughts to settle and makes language feel smoother. At home, I spent some time organizing my workspace. I moved a few things around, cleared old notes, and made space for new ones. While doing this, I described my actions quietly in English. These small habits keep language active in a practical way. In the afternoon, I worked on a task that required focus. I broke it into small steps and moved through them carefully. I noticed how working calmly helps ideas come out more clearly, especially when thinking or writing in English. Later, I took a break and sat near the window. I watched the light shift across the room. Clouds moved slowly, and shadows changed shape. These quiet moments help the mind relax and reset. As evening approached, my husband came home. We talked briefly about our day before preparing dinner together. The conversation flowed naturally, without effort. Cooking side by side always creates space for relaxed communication. After dinner, we went for a short walk. The air was cooler, and the street felt quieter. People passed by, some talking softly, others walking alone. The day was settling. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote a short reflection. I didn't try to capture everything, only what felt meaningful. Writing helps transform experience into language and deepens understanding. As I lay down, I thought about how English has become woven into these moments. It no longer feels separate from life, it moves with it, quietly and naturally. I turned off the light, letting the calm of the day carry me into rest. As the days continued, I began to notice something subtle but important. English was no longer something I used. It was something I lived with. It moved quietly through my routines, my thoughts, and my conversations without asking for attention. One evening, after finishing dinner, I sat alone for a few minutes in the living room. The lights were low. The room felt calm and familiar. I listened to the quiet hum of the house and reflected on how much had changed without any dramatic effort. There was no single breakthrough moment, no sudden realization, just steady progress, built from ordinary days. I thought about how learning often works this way. We expect transformation to feel loud or exciting, but real change usually happens quietly. It happens when we repeat small actions without pressure, when we listen a little more carefully, when we speak without fear of being perfect, when we allow ourselves to grow naturally. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and clear. I followed the same gentle routine. I opened the window, I let fresh air in. I prepared breakfast and stood quietly while eating. Outside, the world continued at its own pace. People passed by. Life moved forward. Later that day, I had a conversation with someone I had never met before. It wasn't planned, it wasn't long, but it felt easy. Words came without hesitation. I didn't search for expressions or worry about mistakes. I simply listened, responded, and stayed present. That moment stayed with me. It reminded me that fluency is not about sounding impressive. It's about feeling comfortable. It's about understanding and being understood. It's about connection, not perfection. As the day unfolded, I went through familiar routines: walking, cooking, reading, writing. Each activity offered another opportunity to stay connected to the language in a natural way. English wasn't something separate from life, it was woven into it. In the evening, I wrote in my notebook again, not to study, not to practice grammar, just to reflect. I described the small moments that made the day feel complete. Writing helped me slow down and notice how far I had come. I realized something important. When we stop treating English as a task and start treating it as part of our daily experience, everything changes. Listening becomes easier. Speaking becomes calmer. Confidence grows quietly. There is no finish line with language, no final level where learning stops. And that's a good thing, because it means there is always room to grow, to notice, and to connect. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt grateful, not for dramatic progress, but for consistency, for patience, for the simple habit of showing up every day. If you are listening now, I want you to remember this. You don't need to rush. You don't need to force fluency. You don't need to sound perfect. All you need is attention, curiosity, and the willingness to let English become part of your real life. Listen to stories, observe the world, describe what you see. Speak when you're ready. Write when it feels natural. Day by day, moment by moment, English will settle into you. Quietly, naturally, and for good. Thank you for spending this time with me.